Hi, and welcome to Spooky Hours. My name's David Saunderson, and today our guest is Christian Jensen Romer, better known as CJ Romer. He's the chairman of ASSAP, the Association of Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. I got my mouth through that. That was quite good. ASSAP. It's one of Britain's largest paranormal organisations. CJ's been studying the paranormal for a very long time now, and he's a font of knowledge. So I'm really pleased to have him on the show today. We can talk to him about some of the things that he's been studying, and basically anything he wants. I want to pick this bloke's brain and find out what his thoughts are when it comes to spooky things. So today, CJ Romer. Hello, CJ. How are you today?
I'm all right. I'm, as always, slightly balding, so wearing my hat to stop the light shining off my head. There you go. You've all seen my bald spot now.
Well,
So,
you're looking very stylish. So whether it's shining or not, it's looking good. So it's been a busy time for ASAP. You've recently had a conference which I spoke at, which I was very pleased to speak at, and you seem to be doing webinars about there's so much going on at the moment with ASAP. How do you have the energy to do this?
I've got no idea because we're all unpaid volunteers. No one in our staff is paid anything. And that's why we're able to keep the fees down. I mean, we charge £5 a year for electronic members and £20 for those who want to have the journal. And the journal and the magazine, which go out, the magazine goes out a couple of times a year. If you imagine the cost of printing in today's environment and post, it's not easy to do it. But people are enthusiastic. We just work. We put in a lot of hours for very little reward, and it's because we love the subject. We're passionate about it. So yeah, we try and offer as much as we can.
You
Yeah.
you love that. You love the subject, as I said before. You've been studying this for a very long time. What got you into? I'm gonna use the word paranormal because anomalous phenomenon is such a broad thing, and it's a bit hard to say. When did you start getting into spooky things?
Okay, so when I was a very young child, I completely disbelieved in the paranormal. And the reason for that was very simple because my parents both claimed to have experienced ghosts. And if there was one thing I was certain of, it was that I was a lot cleverer than my parents. So, being an arrogant, cocky little 10-year-old or whatever, I didn't believe in ghosts. And I had a very, very, very mechanistic view of the world. I didn't believe in any of this religion stuff. I didn't believe in the paranormal. I didn't believe there was anything beyond the world that my senses could understand. And in fact, my first ever ghost experience, which really should have got me interested but didn't, was I was about 7 years old, and there were a lot of members of my family kind of were a lot older than me. My brothers and sisters were older than me, and they used to have parties, and they used to have friends over, and they used to do fancy dress, and so it wasn't unusual to see people dressed up around the farm or messing about. But I went in one day, and I got a bottle of Mr. Sheen, which is an old British furniture polish. Other
Yep,
furniture
yep.
polishes are available. And I was shining the dining room table. And as I was doing it, I don't know why, I suddenly decided to do some housework. I looked around and there was a guy and he was wearing leather armor from head to foot. And he was quite clearly some kind of Romano British or Roman soldier. But he wasn't like, your classic legionary with the rectangular shield with the polished brass and all that gear. This was just a rather scruffy looking guy, and he wasn't much taller than me. And I was only a very young kid, I think. So I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I said, "All right, nice to meet you." Something like that, as you do when one of your brother's friends comes into the house all dressed up. Went back to polishing the table, looked up again, and he wasn't there. So I went, "Wow, that was weird." So I poked my eyes, as you do. I looked out. There was bright sunny days, broad daylight, and it was in my living room, which was not a Roman encampment. It wasn't some spooky ruin. So the whole thing was, I thought, and being, about 7 or 8, I think I was probably 7 actually. I think when this happened, thinking about it, yeah, about 7. I went to my parents and said, "What did I see?" And they said, "It was a ghost." And I looked at them as if they were mad and said, "Ah, you're wrong. I know that some of the older kids have been sniffing glue and solvents, and they have, to get high. I think I breathed in the fumes from the Mr. Sheen when I was clearing the table. So ghosts are a load of rubbish. Therefore, I poisoned myself with the Mr. Sheen." And my mother looked at me in despair and said something like, no, it was a ghost. And I said, no, I saw something that's not real. So she gave me a chocolate biscuit and told me to go away and annoy someone else. And that really sums me up, actually. I mean, I had another weird experience when I was a really small child, but I think that was probably a carryover from a dream or something. We won't go into that at the moment.
Yeah.
But these weird experiences, occurred to me. And because my parents were, to my mind, really superstitious, I just couldn't take it seriously.
Well,
And
but where was this? Where did
oh,
you
it
live?
was on the border of Norfolk and Suffolk. I grew up on a farm there, and it was, if I'd lived 100 years before, my next door neighbour would have been M.R. James, the ghost story writer, because it was directly adjacent to Livermere. And I had some weird experiences. I wrote a bit about them recently. I mean, there was another occasion when me and the other farm kids, we were out on our bikes and we were riding over towards Livermere from the direction of Colford Heath, which is sometimes called the Lost Village. It's basically an almost dead village. There's a few houses there now again, but for many years it was derelict. And there was a derelict church that's now been turned into a house. But anyway, we were riding out across. And as we approached the main road that runs between Bury St Edmunds and Thetford, and we were going to cross over towards Livermere and Ampton, we took a right down a track. Now, we went past this track every day on our way to school, but we didn't very often have a reason to go down it. We drove down it a little way, and we came across this wood mill that had piles of planks outside. But the piles of planks were a bit, kind of mouldy, and it looked like it wasn't particularly active, but it was there. So, being kids, we decided we were on summer holiday. We would get off our bikes, climb up, and try and get into the building. So we clambered all over the wood, and we found that there was one possible route of egress, that if we went up onto the roof, went along the roof, and then dropped ourselves down, but we weren't sure if we'd be able to get out again easily. So we thought we'd better tell someone where we were going. And it was lunchtime, as it happens. So we just turned around, cycled home. And you've got to imagine, you can almost see the location from our house. It's just across the fields, but with a little wood blocking it. So we went home, we had lunch, and told my father, and he said, there's no wood mill. And we said, yes, there is. We've been climbing all over it. And they said, no, firstly, there's not a sawmill like that anywhere on the farm. There's a barn, but it doesn't look like that. And it's in the other direction. And he went through all the possibilities and he said, no, 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 you imagined it. And we went, no, we didn't. So I discovered afterwards that my mates had pretty much the same experience when they talked to their parents, who also lived on the farm, that their dad was a mechanic. And we went back, and sure enough, we couldn't find them. It wasn't there. And so my obvious conclusion, and to this day I still hold this through a lot of so-called time slip experiences and things like that, is that we just had somehow got confused. But as it was straight out my front door, turn right, turn left, turn right, and as I say, diagonally half a mile across the fields, in fact exactly half a mile, it seems impossible that we could have. The only thing we did find was that there was a clearing in the wood. Could somebody have come along? Maybe it was a day later we went back and my memory's wrong.
Mm.
I imagine the whole thing, because this is something that happened when I was a child, 40 odd years ago. I don't know. I don't know. But it shows that you can have these very strong impressions of something spooky and yet, never be quite certain what really happened, especially when you get to adulthood. And recently, many times recently, I've been challenged by memories when I've been talking to my family and stuff about memories. And I find we all remember the same instant completely differently.
Mm.
And on occasion, I get the people who were there wrong. Things when I was at college, I think X was there and it was Y. And, I realize how fragile memory is. And as I get older, that's more of an issue. So anyway, that was why I started off kind of poo-pooing the whole thing. And then 18, I had an experience at Thetford Priory in Norfolk. And that really changed my life because we'd been at a War Games event at the Mid Anglia War Gamers. There were 5 of us. We did a video about this, a TV show about it in the 90s, so I won't go into great detail. But basically, after we left, we were going back, and Darren said he needed the loo, so we pulled over. And my brother lived just beyond the hedge, actually, at the time. So it wasn't, we didn't know Thetford or anything like that. But Thetford's got an old priory off the flyover, which I've never been to. It's an old flint building, and it's largely in ruins, but there's some fairly intact bits. And we decided to go. Darren went into a hedge to have a wee, and the rest of us just standing around waiting for him. Some of them were smoking cigarettes, but none of us were on wacky backy or, trip. It's August the 8th, it's bright sunshine, and the building in front of us at the upper window, there's a guy wearing a black sheet over his head. And I said, look, there's a guy wearing a black sheet over his head. He's trying to do a Scooby-Doo and trying to scare us, something like that. And the others all looked. And if you imagine there's a big arch which goes into the interior of the building, and then you've got a little arch with a staircase that goes directly up, which I didn't realise at the time was Anglo-Norman architecture, but it often was. So it goes straight up, and then the room would be off to the right where he's standing. So we look up at him, and then we notice that he's left the window and he's coming slowly down the stairs. And we realise that he's not dressed with a sheet over his head. He's wearing a kind of black monk's robe, Cluniac style. Not that I would have known that at the time. And the others turned around to me and said, bloody hell, he's trying to scare us. Darren came back, and Dave came back and said, hey, look, there's some guy trying to scare us. So Darren went running at him, and I went running after Darren. Now, this is not because I was a massive proponent of Scooby-Dooism. It wasn't because I wanted to jump on him and rip his mask off. In fact, the opposite. It was that I was frightened that my mate Darren, who looked like a young chap who played Scott in Neighbours. What was he called? Jason Donovan. Donovan. He's all like athletic and blonde hair, and girls love him. And there's me running after this guy, even at the age of 18, I'm wheezing to try and keep up. We go running after him. And I'm worried that Darren's going to jump on him and we're going to get done by the police for assault because, you can't go around jumping on random strangers. Anyway, we get to the stairs. Darren goes hurtling up the stairs. I try and follow him. And we both fell through the staircase because there wasn't a staircase. There was no upper story to the building. There was nowhere where the figure could have gone. So the figure had turned around, and it seemed to the others as if it retreated up the stairs as we approached. So it's broad daylight. We all saw it. And then there's this really weird feeling of something's totally wrong. And now I know it was probably anxiety, but I felt like my legs had turned to jelly and like I was sinking into the ground. I think Axel felt the same because as we ran, we weren't sure if Axel said he had the strong impression that the buildings were becoming more real around us. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but, we'd played Dungeons and Dragons enough to all be quite freaked out by this point, So we're jumping over walls. And as we jump over walls, Axel shouted the amazing line, break its reality, jump the walls, break its reality, which is not something I would ever say ever in my life. It's so like horror movie, but it worked. We got back to the car. Everyone was really upset and a bit freaked out because we'd all seen something that could not occur. And Dave the Munchkin, as we called him, he was a psych student, and he said, let's drive back, let's stop. Before, I think his mother was a psychiatrist. Yeah, that's right. His father worked at the hospital. His mother was a psychiatrist. And he said, that's all right, independent accounts of what happened. So we went back, and my father gave us some paper and thought we were nuts. But, he believed us when we said we'd seen a ghost. But he said, shut up, sit down, write your own accounts. So we wrote the testimonies separately. And it became clear that we all did not see it exactly the same way. One person, Marcus, drew something that looked like Spider-Man in his black Spider-Man outfit. That's what it looked more like what he drew. I drew something which looked more like a woman in a triangular crinoline dress, a very wide dress, but with 3 glittering dark spots on the chest, but with the hood. The others drew something that looked more like a monk, apart from Dave the Munchkin, who's notoriously short-sighted, who drew something that looks like a swirling mass of smoke. But we all agreed with the basic principle that there was a figure, it came down the stairs, it went back up the stairs, and that me and Darren fell through the staircase, and there was no staircase. And at that point, we realised that the building was a shell and was not as intact as when we first saw it. Or that we got the impression it was more intact than it was. I'm not saying that the roof disappeared or anything, because I don't know that to be the fact. I only know. Now, the problem is it's very hard to know anything on these cases, because this incident happened in 1987. And here we are, decades on. And the problem I've discovered is you forget everything. You forget the details. The reason I remember this so clearly is A, we wrote it. B, in the 90s, I was about to do a shoot at an RAF base when the security situation changed and we were told we couldn't make the documentary there. So we just made a documentary and I did my bit of Thetford as half of it just to fill up the space we had. We had like 15 minutes. So we told this story and everyone who was there came out and we dug out the records and we talked it through again. Secondly, I'm still friends with everybody involved, and most of them are still, well, they're all on my Facebook. You know, we're still talking. And although we're all fairly uncertain what happened, none of us believe that, none of us disagree in the basic details. We all agree that what happened happened. The fact we've talked about it so much over the years has kind of made it more solid in our minds because the
Mm.
narrative, you know, so therefore it's
And
not.
that's what changed you from being the cocky little kid that knew everything to the adult that didn't really quite know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, basically, my realization was okay, my parents saw ghosts, people saw ghosts. I'd just seen something that I would call a ghost. But it didn't mean that I was immediately going to think this is a dead guy. So I was off. I was going to go do Anglo-Saxon. That was my original plan. I was going to study Anglo-Saxon and archaeology, and then I decided, look, actually, I want to study something different. So I signed up to do history and religion. And after my first year, I changed my course in between August the 8th and August 23rd and went off to a little college in Cheltenham. And I got really into the religion and philosophy of religion and psychology of religion side. And then I afterwards went on to train, and I spent a few years working in different departments. And I did a lot. I spent 16 years at university, and I tailored that time I spent at university doing postgrads towards working to understand what happens when we see a ghost.
Mm.
So I've been incredibly boring, but since the age of 17, and I was just short of my 18th birthday, which was August 23rd, since that day, I have dedicated my efforts. My sole career aim has been to understand the ghost experience, and I
That's
still don't.
nice. Nice. I want to flip back because I didn't want to stop you telling your story because, it was really gripping and, quite intriguing what going. A couple of things through that. You said you saw a Roman soldier.
Yeah,
Did you ever do any investigations to indicate were there any Roman soldiers on that site, or what do you know about that
um,
instance?
none whatsoever. But there was, I mean, bear in mind that I was interested. I mean, my father was Danish. I'd grown up partly in England, partly in Denmark, and this was in England. I'd lived at that particular farm for a few years, and I lived there till I was a teen. And there was there is a RAF base, Honington, which is very very close. It's just down the road from Livermere. They took some photographs that showed crop marks that show a playing card shaped embankment of some sort. So it seems likely that between the farm and Reimer Point, but still a quarter of a mile away from the house, there was a Roman fort. That would make perfect sense. It's a high land.
Yeah.
It's the kind of grounds where the Romans actually established, forts.
Okay.
It would make sense for commanding that particular ridge. It's an interesting area. There's never been any archaeology done. The current owners of the farm might well be interested in that because that's something that they're very much interested in. They're really fantastic people. I'm not going to name them because I don't want people trespassing
No.
all over their property. But they've got several farms in Suffolk, and they are very committed to archaeology and to history and to this kind of thing.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe one day we'll find out more on that. But I think
I just
it
explore that
triggers the
idea though.
imagination. I was a small child. Small children imagine things, and
Yeah.
I only saw it for a second or two. The
Yeah.
thing I remember, completely solid, totally realistic. There was nothing about the experience which suggested to me that it wasn't real. It wasn't transparent.
Yeah.
Nothing spooky. No sudden cold feeling. In fact, I was basking in the warm sun that was coming in through the window. I was in a Jacobean hunting lodge. A really old house. The farmhouse was really quite 4 centuries old or something. Yet I saw something that had made no sense whatsoever in that context.
Okay.
So
What do you think? I mean, you've seemed to have seen a few things over your life, and I'm thinking like that's never happened to me. I don't get to see hooded figures when I go into a priory or something like that, or
right.
I've never even thought about that. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that some people see stuff and other people just? Well, I mean, I go to all these places that everyone else does, never seen a thing.
Well, firstly, some people are fantasists. Some people are self-aggrandizing. and there's the famous Mrs. Lusher from Southwold, and I thought the name Lusher, which implied a proud tendency to drink. When I was writing a folklore book many, many years ago, I laughed so much because everywhere she went, she seemed to see ghosts. And I imagined this lady who was constantly swigging out of bottles and running into people's houses saying, "Oh no, the phantom carriage nearly knocked me down, Arthur. You better get me another bottle quick. Get me a brandy and a pork pie." But yeah. So from an early age, I have been a complete cynic, as you probably gathered. So some people probably are attention seeking. That story is really dramatic, and I probably would hesitate to tell it, barring the fact that there were 5 of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that's a bit
And
different. That's a little bit different because I'm assuming your mates are probably not as into this as you are
no, not
to
at
this
all.
day.
No, in fact, they find the whole thing fairly embarrassing. That we made a documentary about it, and they kind of yeah, okay, it happened, yeah, sure, but they are not ghost hunters. They are not interested in the paranormal. It's not their thing. And in fact, Axel's quite skeptical in many ways, but we all agree we've all been transformed from the kind of somewhat cocky, skeptical young materialists we were.
Yeah.
Um,
I just
so I
wonder
think,
though. I just wondered. I mean, you said about because I've always thought there's like a couple of different types of people in this field that we are in. There are some, like myself, that would love to see something but never
yeah,
have, and therefore, if I have seen something, it'd have to be like again, like you. I'd think that I was probably, I'd sniff glue or something, whatever. Then there's yourself that saw something, and you know your own mind. But there's other people. They're either telling the truth and they literally saw something and they just can't explain it. They're delusional, or they're just lying.
mad, bad, or yeah. I mean, okay, let's start with the basics. Firstly, we'd have to know what a ghost is before I can get into
Yeah,
answering the question of why some people might have more experiences. There's no doubt that there is a outlying group of people who have a large number of experiences. Now, the first problem becomes, what are those experiences? Because a lot of ghost hunters will have huge numbers of experiences because they will go and they will feel things at haunted houses. Is that because they're going to haunted houses, or is that because what they classify as a ghost is a very low bar? I know that sounds odd. If you're in a haunted house and you see a black figure, I mean, I worked for a few years after I worked on Most Haunted. I worked for Richard Felix for about a year or two at Derby Jail. And it was one day, again, bright afternoon, sunny, and I went in, and it's something that I probably wouldn't say was a ghost, but I went over to unlock. Becky was sitting out the back in the car. There was another guy called Tom who were expecting to turn up to help out that night. And I turned around, and the reason I turned around was the light coming into the jail was all coming down a corridor from the back garden where the sun was. I hadn't gone down to turn the lights on. So it's a very dark space, all shuttered. So the only light source coming in is suddenly blocked out. So I turn around and there's a big hulking guy standing in the doorway, silhouetted, and I say, "Hi, Tom." I then proceed to go, turn the lights on, turn the coffee on, come back, and find A, Tom hasn't arrived. He turns up 20 minutes later, and B, Becky swears nobody went in past her through the back door. So it would be really easy for me to say that was a ghost. But it's possible that somebody just walked in and went to see what was happening. Becky didn't notice them, and you know what I mean. It's not like I walked through them or I walked up to
mm,
them. It was just a weird experience. So when you're in a supposedly haunted location, the bar for what is a ghost may become lower.
yeah.
That might be why people who go hunting for ghosts see more ghosts.
But you weren't looking for a ghost. You just saw something, and it
Yeah,
was weird. Whereas if I'm on a ghost hunt or I'm doing something where I'm gone to and I'm trying to look like I'm looking for something. I'm hoping there's something. You weren't. You were just waiting around like you'd be at the shops or something.
yeah, but soon
I,
after I became fascinated, and soon after that we did start to pay attention, and we did
yeah,
start to go out hunting ghosts, etc. And the point was that when I was at university, those few years of my life between about 18 and 25, I mean, the first 2 years that I was a ghost hunter, we set up the Cheltenham Psychic Research Group, and we contacted. I joined the Society for Psychical Research soon after the experience. I met the great and the good of ghost hunting. The Tony Cornell, Alan Gould, all the big names of the 1980s and 90s I got to know, and 70s, 80s, 90s. I met people who'd been ghost hunting with Harry Price, and who had been to. I met everyone who'd been at Enfield and talked constantly to Morris Gross and Guy Leon Playfair about what had happened at Enfield, and I met people who were sceptical about Enfield but had been there, and that was a really good experience for me because it meant that as I was a young kid, but I was taking on board all this stuff from lots of people who had been around and had become utterly cynical or utter believers, but who had got strong convictions. And I think it taught me a lot, just the experience of being exposed to other people who didn't think like me. It made me less cocky, it made me way less sure of myself, and exposed me to lots of different ideas that I'd never have got if I'd just stayed and, ghost hunting with my mates. But the really weird bit was those first few years, we went on several cases where the evidential, the stuff we experienced was really shaky. I mean, it was at one point I joked that it either we were about to experience a disaster of biblical proportions, cats and dogs living together, real wrath of God stuff, because the PKE meters were going off the scale right about 87 to 95, or there was paranormal phenomena anywhere, and anyone who went looking for it could encounter these really strong cases. And then
That's an interesting thought. Sorry, go on.
suddenly, in the late 90s, it dried up, and I've been to 90 more cases probably in the next decade. No, maybe not that many. I don't know. I mean, 90 in a decade would be quite a lot, wouldn't it? I can't work it out. But yeah, I mean, I went to a lot of
It's
cases.
only 10 a year, so I mean, that's not.
Yeah, but I mean, 10 a year is still quite a lot.
Okay, well, you didn't go, but you went to a lot then.
I went
You
to a
went,
lot. I don't know exactly how many. I mean, it was probably, probably 20, 10 a year is actually not a bad guess. One every couple of months, probably, though.
Yep.
Probably near a 6 a year, I reckon.
Yep.
But, who knows?
And you said it washed up though. That's or it dried up. What was that
Yeah,
about?
I mean, we went to the ancient ram. The only phenomena we encountered at the ancient ram in '92, we were able to explain and reproduce. We discovered, I mean, my theory about the ancient ram was that there had been a very real poltergeist outbreak there involving a lady who lived there at the time in '88, John's daughter Caroline, who still runs it today. And I think that there was real paranormal events back then, but nothing. We were totally we
Do you think it dries up after a while because you have 500 million paranormal investigators in there wandering around all
well,
every night, and you,
not at that point. That was before any of them really went
no,
there.
that's why you were there. But now
Yeah.
there's
Oh yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
every
I mean,
week
we
now.
wrote. There's a somewhere in the SPR archive. There's our report on the ancient ram, which should be dragged out because we used to write reports and place them in the SPR archive. And if they've been kept and not been junked, they would be really interesting to go back because if you look at Warwick Castle, the stuff that was recorded around about 1999 compared with the stuff that was recorded when most the ghost stories recorded when Most Haunted was there, and I was doing the research around about 10 years later, 5 years later, 6 years later, the ghost stories had changed drastically.
Yeah.
So this is another thing. Ghost stories change, witnesses, and you get different stories. So the same location, but there's a whole new raft of different stories and different experiences. And
Paul
it's
Lee, Paul Lee, who attended the ASSAP conference, he's done a lot of research, and he
yeah,
said that he felt that a lot of these places were losing their hauntedness just through time, and that's why I was interested when you said that you'd seen a Roman centurion or a Roman soldier, or whatever. Uh, you know, we don't see them all the time because maybe that just the energy over a period of time disappears.
yeah, I mean, the person to actually talk to about this would be my girlfriend, Dr. Becky Smith, who did her PhD on apparitions. She recreated the 1894 census of hallucinations. And what she found was from 1894 through the whole of the census tradition of research, where you actually go out and talk to people about the experiences they had, not when they were looking for ghosts, but when things just happened to them. There is a definite tendency for apparitions to be of their time. In fact, there's another thing which is really interesting, which is a large number of apparitional experiences are of people who are alive at the time.
Yeah.
And not just crisis apparitions, not just people who are stuck down the well or are falling off a cliff and hanging on by their fingernail, but are thinking of Doris or have just been killed in battle and they're seen with their mother. There are many people, a lot of ghost experiences run something like this. Well, I was sitting at home, I was upstairs, my husband came in, I said, "Hello, dear." He came upstairs, went to the toilet. I went out to greet him, and he wasn't there. And that's all. Or I saw him walking down the drive. He came in, And is it just expectation? Well, actually, I mean, Beck did some research, and she didn't think that expectation played a big role.
What
So,
about what about I just wonder. I'm putting this back on you just because of what you said before. It's very intriguing about the idea of memory. I'm sitting at home watching TV, doing whatever I'm doing,
yeah,
and then I get a phone call, and I'm told I read a letter a day later or something. My son's died in the First World War or whatever.
yeah.
Now, in my memory, whether it's a fake memory or not, remembering, I don't know. I'm just wondering how there's memory in the, it's cause and effect type thing. Did
Right.
I actually
Okay.
see something, or am I just hallucinating from the shock of what's happened?
When I started off in 87 to about 95, those first few years, I was very skeptical, and I believed that the answer would lie. I went and trained as a psychiatric nurse. I mean, became a nurse tutor briefly. It's the kind of thing that you do when you're young. But it was because I wanted to understand if mental illness played a role, and I don't think it does. I think the experiences are fairly normatively distributed across the population. It can happen to anyone. And nor do I think that people are lying. I don't think most people make it up. I mean, yeah, there'll be some dingbats who are attention seeking, but it's going to be a fairly small proportion because people have these experiences all the time. The most common one is hearing someone call your name. You look round, and evolutionary psychologists will say that's simply because we're programmed to hear our own name. But I think there's something more profound going on here. I think there is actually something real underlying it, and that's what makes me different from a lot of people who've worked in the field. So let's start with the first question you asked, which is why so many experiences to some people. The first issue is I think there's probably personality and possibly neurological parts to that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with my brain, but one of the big theories is Hartman boundary thinness. Some people seem to have ideas and concepts and their brain structured, and we all wire our brains individually through synaptic links through our experiences, but some people have very distinct boundaries between their lunchtime experience, their experience of watching a movie, their emotions, and their knowledge of the history of the baked bean. Other people, those connections that they've forged themselves in their brain, and everybody's synaptic links are very different, might break down the categories a bit more. And there might be a merging of emotion, there might be a merging of emotion and memory and other parts. And it could be that people with thin boundaries, there's been a lot of work done on boundary thinness. You can look it up, it's a psychological concept, but it's based on neurology as far as I understand it. And I mean, bear in mind that this is not my field at all, so I could be
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
rubbish, but just Google it. It's on Wikipedia. You can look it up for yourself. The notion is that boundary thinness might make some people more susceptible to those experiences. Now, there's a suggestion that you've got people who are fantasy prone, and that the fantasy prone personality is a type of person who cannot differentiate between a daydream and their normal objective existence. So they daydream intensely in very vivid ways. Now, oddly, me and Becky, we're both aphantastic, which means we cannot see. If you ask me to close my eyes and visualize a green triangle, I can't. Yeah, there's just no chance. It won't work. So we're not very good at visual imagination. So we'd be really poor candidates if that was the case for daydreaming and for seeing ghosts, if ghosts are just imaginary constructs created by daydreaming. So there's loads of research done on this stuff, but let's go back right to the basics of why some people could be personality. It could be that people are psychic. Now, the problem is whether you're psychic because of boundary thinness, whether you're psychic because you've got strong visual imagery, whether you're psychic because you're able to pick up pheromones that have been released in a location and somehow read the chemical history of a location, whatever the reason why you might be psychic, whether you're psychic because you're the seventh son of a seventh son and you were blessed by a gypsy and the fairies daubed you with heather, or you had a cool over your head when you were born, and afterbirth, whatever the reason, the term psychic is just a shorthand for people who have experiences other people do not have. I am incredibly unpsychic, with one ridiculous exception. I'll tell you the story because it's funny. One night I was chatting to my then girlfriend, Nick, and she said we had a pack of Xena cards and we'd been doing a load of tests. and another friend came around, and they said, "Well, come on, CJ, you never take part in these." And I said, "That's because I score absolutely average. I've done like 3 or 4 runs of 25 cards. I score absolutely average." And they said, "Come on, then let's try again." And I'd been down the bar, and no one was wearing mirror shades, because that's the classic way you cheat. If someone's wearing mirror shades, they hold up the card, you can see it. And there was no reflective surface. And I honestly don't know how this happened, but I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to ask." I can't remember what he was called. He had a silly name. Gus, the Invisible Goblin, something like that. "I'm going to ask my friend Gus, the Invisible Goblin, to tell me the cards. Is that cheating?" And they said, "No. No, you ask away. Ask Gus if he wants to tell you the cards." So I'm sitting there, and I got a run of 25 out of 25. And the odds against that are millions to one. And each time I would ask Gus, "What is the card?" And, it would, and I think I got 23 or 20 on a second run. I can't remember. It was ridiculously high because we thought it was just fluke. And they shuffled the cards, and they checked for sensory deprivation. They moved me on the other side of the room, so there was facing the wall, blah blah blah. And then it just went back to normal. And the only difference was that I had imagined a small goblin who was, I couldn't actually visualize it, but I'd stated there was a small goblin who was telling me the cards. And this was a complete figment of my imagination, yet somehow it seemed to allow me to read the cards that one time. Now, actually, it's entirely possible that it was just my turn, because some people win the lottery, and it might be that if we did a Xenocard test now, you would get 25 out of 25, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen very often, but it is going to happen. So it could have just been coincidence. But, I think I get excited by anything over 7 correct cards out of 25, let alone 25.
It's just a pity that wasn't the day that you picked the lottery. You're going to waste your one chance of life, and that was it.
You see, this is it. I mean, the problem is that, and again, I was slightly, I don't drink nowadays, but I'd had a couple of beers. I was really relaxed, and I wasn't taking it remotely seriously. And I certainly wasn't trying to impress the ladies.
It is a game. It could be chance. I mean, chance can do it. It's not like it's impossible, because you can do it. It's just very, very highly improbable.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, I remember it simply because it happened, and because they remember it because it happened. But none of us could explain why it happened. But it was interesting because it gave me a clue that perhaps intent, because I didn't care about the outcome, because I wasn't taking it seriously. Did that matter? I mean, normally when you're trying to do a psychic experiment, you're like straining every nerve to try and get the answer right. And that never works for me. I always, Whereas on this occasion, when I was mucking around and wasn't taking it seriously, the other thing was, the only reason I believed them when they said it was one girl wrote down the things that I'd guessed, and the other girl, out of each card, placed them face down, one on top of the other. So they weren't lying, as in Ghostbusters, because we were able to check back the cards afterwards, because we just put them down one at a time. So, we could just replay the experiment and check that there weren't any errors. Because otherwise, it could have just been, one of them was messing around and pretending I was psychic to wind me up, knowing that I'd freak out. But, these things happen, and I don't think it matters. I don't pay much attention to it. I didn't go out and become a tarot card reader the next day, or claim that I was psychic, or suddenly start, spoon bending, because that's not what I do.
Yeah,
So,
you do a lot of investigations, I know, and you did something at ASSAP at the conference. I left early at the night, not
right,
early, but it was a long day, and I went home. And you were doing something in a tent or something that was some kind of
a gazebo, because it was always
gazebo. Can you tell us about that? Explain what that was, because I still don't
right.
know. So tell the audience, but also tell me, because I don't know to this day what that was all about.
Okay, so basically, the problem we have with ghosts is that people imagine them as imaginary beasties who live in certain buildings, who don't go anywhere, and just wait around for ghost hunters to come along. I mean, Ghost the sitcom, you got this perfect, because I've never actually seen an episode.
It's lovely. Watch it.
Yeah, I keep meaning to watch that, because it's really good, apparently. It's something I've wanted to watch from the beginning, and yet I've never actually found time to do it. But I will do. But in that, the ghosts live in the house. Yeah, and that's a common conceit. We believe that the house is haunted by the ghost, and the ghost is always there. But because it's largely invisible, it only reveals itself to some people, especially talented, or it only manifests on occasions. Right. So the thing about that is, we've got to consider what is a ghost. And my first the first thing I'll say is a ghost is a hallucination. I'm pretty sure a ghost is a hallucination. Well, am I? No, no, I'm not. Because let's start with what are the attributes of ghosts. Most ghosts are solid. Most ghosts, when you look at the experiences, look like real people. They enter the room normally. They come in through the door. They don't walk in through walls. They don't suddenly appear out of nowhere. They actually, usually, when you first witness them, they appear to be a normal person doing normal stuff. Most ghosts leave in an unusual manner. So they fade away. Suddenly they're not there when you look around, or the experience ends in some other way that signifies that it wasn't a real person. They could walk through walls, maybe, or something similar, but normally they just fade away, or they're just not there. And you look up. The first question that arises then is as that's true of 99.999% of what we call ghosts, is this a category thing? Is it just because that is the definition of ghost that we apply? Well, this is for apparitions, visual. I'm talking about human figures seen by, somebody who's... So those ghosts are... Why do they disappear in an unusual way but enter in a normal way? Well, I think the important thing here is that when they disappear, if they walked out the door, you would not assume they were a ghost. If they didn't act in an unnatural way, you would assume they were a real physical person who entered your house. So a lot of people have that experience, but if they see their husband coming home and he comes in through the front door, goes to his bedroom, gets something, and then they see him leaving again, they might think he's, cheating with that woman at number 36, rather than, and he came in and had some reason to lie. It's only the fact that he suddenly is no longer there that makes them think it's a ghost. Yeah. So first thing is, we could be seeing a lot more ghosts than we actually realise, because they appear like real people and they interact normally. So it could be that we all see ghosts every day of our life, but we're not aware of it. Sorry about the creaky chair, by the way. It's not meant to be spooky. It's just I'm too fat. But no, it's a broken chair. But it is entirely possible that apparitions occur all the time. We just don't realise they're ghosts. So maybe you're actually seeing a lot more ghosts than I am, but because you're not seeing them disappear, because you're just walking past them on the street. And actually, a few times recently, I've had that weird experience of looking at someone who's so chronically out of place. They're dressed like they're from the 1950s or 1960s or 1930s. And I'm thinking, are they real? Am I seeing an apparition? Shall I follow them? No. There was also another really weird experience. I went to a friend's funeral who died tragically young. I won't name her because sensitivities and family and stuff, but she died of lung cancer, and she's a good friend of mine for 20 odd years. And she was a kind of goth, and she was very, very distinctive in her look. And a few days after she died, I was walking past Casper's, the local ice cream parlour. And as I walked past, I saw her sitting in the window of the ice cream parlour, and I thought of the line from 5 Years by David Bowie. I thought I saw you in an ice cream parlour, drinking milkshakes cool and long, smiling and waving and looking so fine. I don't think you knew you were in my song or whatever. And I turned around and I waved her, and she kind of just nodded at me as if to say hi, but she didn't kind of give me the kind of... And then I suddenly thought, but you're dead. And the realisation she was dead came 10 steps further down the road. So I turned around and I walked back, and at the risk of looking like an old pervert, I stopped and I looked through the window, and she was there, and she was real, and she was eating her ice cream, and the guy came over and gave her her bill. And I realised that even though I could not tell her apart from my friend was not only dead, but she'd lost some weight. She'd become, she'd shown signs of her illness. And there was absolutely no way it could be her, because she looked physically solid. So it had to be another person who looked very much like my friend. It's just mistaken identity. And that might account for a lot of ghost sightings because the context of seeing someone who looks so much like a very unusual girl, down to the nose stud, the hair, the goth dress sense, and she was a distinctive individual. And I'd known her since 1989. She died 2017, something like that. So we'd known each other. We'd seen each other on a weekly basis for that period, probably. It wasn't easy for me. And I wasn't actually, I know it sounds odd, but I wasn't, because she'd spent a year and a half knowing she was dying, and she was terribly matter of fact about it, and very, I wasn't actually really cut up at the time. I didn't think there was any kind of strong emotion left. I feel it more now, actually, talking about it. But yeah, so some experiences are just going to be down to coincidence, you know. But let's think of another possibility. Let's imagine that I had seen another friend who died. Let's choose one of my other friends. One of my friends who died is a guy called John, who's an absolutely great guy. Didn't believe in ghosts. Always thought I was talking bollocks, and he was a really good guy. He worked in kind of security kind of roles. I'll never forget. We took him with the Student Parapsychology Society to Thetford Priory one night, and we were kind of flashing torches around, and John had like 4 mag lights. He had a belt of mag lights. He had a huge torch in his hand, and he had like 3 or 4 more torches on bandoliers because he was handing them out to people. And a group of the girls decided to flash their boobs at him, and he turned off his torch immediately and said, "Oh, terrible! And I would have seen that if only I'd had a light, gentlemen." He was a gentleman. He really was a great guy, but he died recently. He was a top bloke, and if I was to see him, there's 3 possibilities I can think of. Firstly, it's his spirit that is somehow communicating from wherever he is now, from a post-mortem existence, via some kind of signal that my brain is able to pick up. So he's sending a telepathic impulse, and that telepathic impulse is picked up by my brain. And so what is actually happening is telepathy. Second possibility, my desperate need to see John and to be reassured that there's life after death and that the old boy's doing well. He wasn't that much, he was younger than me. Has caused me to imagine it, but in such a way that my senses have fooled me for psychological reasons into seeing something that's not there. And the very common nature of bereavement hallucinations, when we lose a loved one, but then we see them, might suggest that could happen, but I don't think it does. I'm going to get back to this because I do believe in a kind of spiritual ghost, as you'll discover in a minute. But the third possibility is that there is a glitch in my memory and I have a hallucination. Something causes my brain to misfire, and I need to create a visual image, and I glitch, and the visual image that I superimpose on my environment in that moment is just taken from my memory. And rather than choosing a picture of Sam Fox singing Touch Me or one of her other 1980s hits, which would be at least more pleasant, I guess. Well, maybe not, actually. That's probably more scary. Or instead of, a picture of my grandmother or something, I just drag up. And that would imply, if the memory, if the accessing images from the memory theory of ghosts is correct, that would suggest to me that every ghost we see could be traced to a visual image from something we saw in our own past. So we would not see an apparition of something that we could not imagine or had never seen before. So if I'd never been exposed to someone with a significantly different skin tone to me, because I'd grown up in some kind of weird racist, religion, Suffolk, surrounded by nut jobs. I didn't, I'm hastening to add, but if that was the case, but then I saw a ghost of somebody of a different ethnicity, that would imply, that it was a memory thing. There's all kinds of possibilities, because it means that if it's memory, there's no reason why people can't see ghosts of unicorns, because we've all seen plenty of pictures of unicorns. If it's memory, there's no reason why we can't see demons or ghosts or UFOs, because we've all been exposed to visual images of those things on television, etc. So that would imply that as our society changes, the stock of images that we see would change from being horses and carriages or Romans or medieval women, because most of us don't see a lot of those. And we'd be far more to see ghosts from our own time era, which is actually what's happening. So we've got 3 possible options: telepathy, misfiring of the brain causing a random hallucination that chooses from our memory, or a psychological need-driven model. Could be all 3. But the important bit here is that we all hallucinate. And I know this sounds really unlikely, and you might think, well, no, we don't. But actually we do, because when you went to sleep last night, you might not remember it when you woke up, but you probably had dreams. Even I, who doesn't see visual imagery and often dreams in text, have dreams. And in dreams, we can be in a world that seems as real as our own world, and we can interact with objects, and we can talk to people who are dead. And in those dreams, we don't find it strange if we talk to someone who's dead. We don't find it strange if we dream about our old school and we see our headmaster. He's been dead for 30 years, perhaps, but we can see him, we remember what he's like, and in our dream, he might interact with us.
Yeah.
So, dreams are hallucinations. They are the brain creating an environment that allows us to experience things that are not real. So, it's no surprise that our brain can therefore use the same mechanisms to superimpose at Thetford Priory a figure onto that staircase. Absolutely no surprise at all.
But more than you just saw that. Your mate and everyone saw something.
Right, exactly. This is the interesting bit. What if the dream mechanism is being used by the brain to provide a visual cue to something that is in the environment that we can't see? So hallucinations do very objective, and this is the bit that's really hard for someone who's not a mental health type to think of. We can hallucinate something that is true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Irrational statements can be true. Again, that seems very strange to most people. A rational statement is one that is logically consistent. Yeah. So 2 + 2 = 4 is consistent in our mathematical systems. That's a rational argument. But rational arguments are not necessarily correct, they are just consistent. Syllogisms are rational. I'm not going to get into the logic of this too much, but it doesn't matter. We can experience things that are hallucinatory but are real.
Yeah.
My
Well, it's
mother
oh,
So
sorry.
my mother, when she was alive, if I saw a ghost of my mother, she was still a real person. She was still alive. Can ghosts, therefore, imagine that we have a source in the environment in my room? That means that people who come into this room, their brains pick up a signal from a pale-faced girl holding a ginger cat who is just come in and starts to laugh at them. That would be my housemate. She's in the other room, just in case she does come in holding a ginger cat. I thought, prime her so you all jump. But yeah, she probably won't now. But, if the ghost was here, when we experience the ghost, we're picking up the signal, but our brain has no way of relaying that information because there's no physical person present. So all of the time, wherever we're driving, the blind spot when you're driving,
Yeah.
or when I'm sitting here, there's a blind spot somewhere over here, but my field of vision is, actually filling it in. My brain is recreating we don't just see the outside world. Our brain generates the outside world inside our head. So we fill in the blind spot using what we know about the environment. And what we're seeing at the moment, rather than have a black gap in our blind spot, is being filled in by our brains. So we are using the hallucinatory aspects already. So imagine that in that studio inside our head, we suddenly place the ghost. We pick up the ghost signal. We feel the presence of a woman. We feel the presence of a cat. We've got that signal. There are 4 of us in the room. Maybe all 4 of us might see it slightly differently because we access our memory stock or our own notions of catness or womanhood or whatever. But we're all actually objectively experiencing the same thing. Oh, I know this sounds nuts. It's not easy to explain. Have you ever played Pokemon Go?
Is that the one where they have the little screen and you can see things? I know what it is, but I've never done it. So, but I
So
know the idea.
Pokemon, yeah, what happens with Pokemon is you and I are walking down the street, we've both got our phones out, and we both see a Pikachu, a Pokemon, 100 yards ahead of us on the right. And we can both capture it by chucking balls at it. It's there for both of us. It's real. But all that actually exists is a set of mathematical code that says that particular location on the GPS is associated with this particular creature with these particular stats. Our phones act as a medium which allow us to see it and interact with this imaginary creature that is actually only a mathematical construct. But if you're looking through your phone, you'd see it superimposed on the street. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm suggesting that our minds may allow us to pick up information which might be real and might be very important. And then because that information is important to us, we use the part of our brain that hallucinates to bring it to our attention in a way that doesn't cause us, to go into shock. If
Yeah.
it doesn't just, it has to come to our senses somehow, so it superimposes itself on our visual field, and that would imply that every ghost experience probably has some kind of meaning or purpose in your life.
Well, I think we're going to leave it there, CJ, because we've gone through so many different bits tonight, and it's and I want to talk to you again another time, because I just think we could probably talk for hours, and you blow my mind a little bit there, some of those things, and I think there's some really interesting, just some little aspects there you spoke about that I'd like to think about and maybe talk to you about another time, because just little things, a bit like just what you just said about, you and your mates, and you were able to see something, you wrote it down, your other mate wrote down something, then your munchkin mate, he
Yeah,
said
David
something
Munchkin.
and he saw it as a blur, so because he had poor eyesight, so it may
Yeah,
well be that there's something there, you all saw it, but you interpreted it a different way
yeah,
because of your eyesight, and that's essentially what you're saying. These, maybe ghosts are all they are is blurry things that, and we make them into human form, and we put clothes on them because that's how
yeah.
we can understand things.
Tyrrell, the famous psychical researcher who wrote a book in '48, said, if you've got a ghostly highwayman, if it was the spirit of the highwayman, what is the spirit of the ghost of the horse there as well?
Yeah,
If we see a guy coming down the stairs, as we did, and this was the really interesting bit about the Thetford experience, when we ran down here, we fell through the stairs. Stairs don't have a spirit, but the stairs would not, without the stairs, the ghost would have made no sense. We'd have just seen something like hanging in the air. You know what?
yeah, yeah. Well, that's why
So,
they walk through walls, isn't it? Because the idea being that they didn't exist when that happened. The,
well, yeah, that is the argument. I mean, I'm actually cynical, but it's another day.
it's a,
Last thing, very quickly, if you ask 100 people, have you seen a ghost, and they say yeah, say 10% of them, say 10 of them say yeah, and you say how long ago did it happen, and you give them a series of tick boxes. When did you last have an experience, or when did you have an experience? Most of them will have had the experience within the last 6 months. Then it will go down to a year, then it will go down to 2 years, and then 10 years. Very few people will talk about experiences they had 30 years ago. And the reason for that seems to be that we very, very, very quickly get supernatural experiences, paranormal
yeah.
experiences. And we don't just slightly forget them, we completely edit them out. We lose all interest in them and just delete them from our memories. And I find that fascinating. I think that's really interesting that we are deleting these weird experiences that don't fit in.
Why do you
Anyway,
think that
leave it
is?
there.
Why do you think that is? Before you go, don't leave us hanging there. What do you think
Um,
the reason
I
is?
think I think that our minds are. I think what happens is rationality reasserts. Our minds are designed to interact with the real world, to let us build Lego bricks, to let us get something for dinner,
Yeah,
to let us make tea, and that information that is really difficult to process or is emotionally vulnerable makes us emotionally
yeah.
vulnerable. We just lose interest in it. We get rid of it. We might actually purge it because it gets in the way of doing the
Too
stuff we
hard. It's in the
have to
too
do.
hard basket. It's in the too hard basket. We
It's
don't.
for the too hard basket. It's for the. I find this slightly upsetting, and I would
Yeah,
prefer not to think about it.
yeah. No, that's a good idea. Well, let's leave that there. Now, CJ, you were saying that people can. How can they become a member of ASSAP?
Sure. A fiver a year will let you join and come to our webinars, which are every week on a Thursday night. www.assap.ac.uk/join. You can Google join ASSAP, or you can go to ass as in donkey, as in AWS, ASSAP. .ac.uk and probably work it out there, or you can go to YouTube and watch all the old webinars.
Well, I'm going to
Some of
put
which
I'll
are
put the links in here.
really
They don't
old.
have to listen to you because ASSAP
Yeah,
and all that. No, I can never spell it. But anyway, we'll do
no,
that.
neither can I. And some people call it ASAP, and some people call it ASAP, and I'm the chair, and I don't know which is right. So
Well,
do whatever you feel.
it's fine.
Have a good day.
All right. You have a great one, CJ. We look forward to talking to you another time. Okay.
All right, take care now. Good night.
See you. Bye.